A very good afternoon to all the viewers who are watching SATV today. We are broadcasting live from the Dhaka studio, and this is, of course, International Affairs. Let me introduce my panelists before we start our discussion. In the studio, we have Mr. John Charles Dalton, who, of course, joins us as international consultant. He's going to be commenting on various topics which have huge, enormous significance around the world and also in Bangladesh. But also we have Norman Floyd Barnes, who used to be an ambassador for Senators Consultum, and of course he joins us as SATV's international correspondent from Washington, D.C. Good morning to you, Norman. I believe it is 4:30 in the morning, but I want to begin our discussion today with Donald Trump and what he has said regarding the Epstein files. Almost 20,000 files have been recently released, and of course Donald Trump had asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate these Epstein files. Bondi has responded by assigning Manhattan U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton to lead the probe. My question to Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes: is Trump's demand for Epstein investigation into his political opponents a legitimate call for transparency or a partisan weaponization of the Department of Justice? Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes.
Greetings. It's 3 a.m. here in Washington, D.C., and the Trump administration is once again involved in this Epstein saga, and the president has requested the Justice Department to investigate. It appears that this is another attempt to weaponize the system, and the focus is on investigating his political opponents, see what involvement they have had with the Epstein case, deflecting the attention away from himself.
Thank you, Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes. I believe there are more news regarding this case. We know that Jeffrey Edward Epstein, he's known in history, he's gone down in history as a serial sex offender, and it implies the rich and the powerful. This time, of course, we have ex-President Bill Clinton, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and Reid Hoffman. These are names that are very popular in America's governance. My question to John Dalton would be, you see, this investigation it hasn't ended. Every now and then, every couple of weeks, we see that the Epstein issue keeps on coming up in the mainstream media. It includes both Fox and CNN. I want your take. And you know, this is a reputational hamper for the U.S. government in general. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's one of those things that simply will not go away. And as much as they try to bury it and to try to deflect away from it, that just simply raises it to another level of inquiry by people who really want to know what happened. I think the current action to try to deflect away from what's in the Epstein files concerning Donald Trump by focusing on Bill Clinton or Ehud Barak or Larry Summers, who was the Treasury Secretary, former president of Harvard as well, is just an effort to say that the Democrats did it too. Don't just look at me and my friends. The Democrats were just as bad as I am. So if you're going to criticize them, the Democrats, you better make sure that you're ready to listen to your own party's elite to be criticized as well. But that kind of misses the point, doesn't it? I mean, the point of all of this is whether or not the President of the United States in the past engaged in activities with underage girls at this, under the supervision and support of Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein basically, it's been said, made all of his money through bribery, that he would get people into these compromising positions and then demand substantial amounts of money from them. That's what Howard Lutnick had to say about it, that he was a known briber. They lived next to each other in New York. So Epstein rose from a practical nobody, a teacher, high school teacher or grammar school teacher in New York, to be one of the wealthiest men in the world and a patron of the person that owns Victoria's Secret. So he had money at his disposal. He used it inappropriately. Many rich and famous people were at his parties. His parties were always attended by young 13 to 17-year-old girls. They've already now come forward and have formed a group that try to bring pressure on Congress to find the truth, and the Justice Department to find the truth. Every attempt will be made to bury this. The recent revelations came from the Epstein estate that released these emails that made their way to the Democrats on this oversight committee and then into the press. They were released by Congress.
Yes.
But the Justice Department, which has a trove of information, including going back to 2008 when Epstein was first convicted in Florida for trafficking in young women, all of that information is still very much under control by Trump's Department of Justice. American people want to know. Many Republican congressmen want to know.
Exactly.
Were you in there? If you were, let's get at the facts. It's possible that this may lead to some resignation. It's possible it may lead to impeachment, although it was done prior to his presidency, so maybe that's not appropriate. But people want to know, were you involved in this salacious, disgusting activity with 13, 14, 15-year-old girls? Easy question.
From what I was saying, we know that the Republicans were always calling for a transparency regarding this matter. And to move on with this issue, I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes. As you were hearing John Dalton in the studio and how Republicans want a much more transparency regarding this issue, my question to Norman Floyd Barnes, we know that history's longest shutdown just ended, 40 or 41 days. But immediately after, this new issue has arisen inside America's governance. My question to Norman Floyd Barnes, do you think that this issue that Donald Trump had framed calling a Democratic hoax, where is the end to this? And of course, many are saying that Donald Trump is panicked. Reporters talked to him about this issue on Air Force One, and he was seen very panicking, or he was seen stressed about this matter. What is your take? Do you think impeachment may be in the coming days?
No. Emphatically, no. This is another scenario that has been going on. There's a lot of things that is developing. We're getting back from this shutdown. We are impending Venezuela, about what we're going to do in Venezuela. And we also know that the immigration forces just upped their enforcement in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that is actually going on right now. So we have a lot of stuff going on, and this impeachment call for the Epstein file is not high on the pecking order right now.
Yeah, I agree with Norman. As I said, the crimes that were committed were prior to his presidency, so impeachment probably is not the right solution. But there may be other means, just embarrassment or whatever. People simply want to know.
Most definitely.
Yes.
As Norman Floyd Barnes was talking about Venezuela, the U.S. position, I want to give our viewers some of the background details. Donald Trump revoked Chevron's license to operate in Venezuela, citing the Maduro government failure to meet electoral conditions. This is, of course, as a movement that Donald Trump had implied. He has signed an executive order, EO 14245, that imposes a 25% tariff on goods imported into the U.S. from any country that buys Venezuelan oil. This is no less of a declaration of war between the two sides. I want to come to you, John. How do you see this? We know that numerous people have been killed, these boats that are allegedly trafficking narco substances into the U.S. And of course, U.S. military has stepped into the Caribbean. These tensions that are unfolding, what is your take? How do you see this?
Well, I think there's a great deal of animosity between the U.S. administration, let's not personalize this, between the U.S. administration and Venezuela over trafficking in drugs and people and the like. And the Venezuela administration, it's rich in oil, of course. They need to be brought under some sort of international control, simply because the Monroe Doctrine dictates that whatever happens in the Western Hemisphere, in South America, North America, the United States will take action as necessary to protect its interests. So the Monroe Doctrine goes way back historically. Whether it applies in this specific situation or could be made to apply, about we have the right to stop this crime that's taking place of transmitting narcotics. That's a question which is very, very open to question about whether or not there's any proof that these boats are in fact transporting drugs. One assumes that they would not act on their own, but there's simply no. They have not gone to the courts to get the court order to do this. This is simply an unilateral action against these people who are perceived to be and alleged to be transporting drugs. So I think it's sort of rattling the sword with respect to Venezuela. I don't expect any action beyond that. But I think there's clearly a tension that the United States wants to make Venezuela a demonstration case for you are not going to allow people to come into the country from Venezuela, or we're not going to allow you to bring in drugs. And that appeals very much to his base, and we'll see. It's not going to stop. There's no pressure against it. So I'm sure that the Secretary of War will be very happy to continue this effort.
Last Wednesday, the Secretary of Defense, now known as the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, had a very close meeting with Donald Trump on briefing regarding this Venezuelan issue. From what I understand is, of course, as you were saying, you know, if a boat is targeted by a military vessel, there must be some kind of process, some kind of arrest being made, or some kind of search for whether that boat, of course, is carrying such narco elements. I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes. As you were hearing John Dalton in the studio, who was referring that these issues regarding the Venezuelan boat, the dynamic between Nicolas Maduro's government and Donald Trump, it seems to me that Donald Trump has issued a war against narco trafficking, not only from Venezuela. And of course, there are joint military cooperations with nations such as Puerto Rico and Trinidad and Tobago. Those nations are definitely helping the U.S. side on winning this war. So my question to Norman Floyd Barnes, you see there is no procedural element in addressing these boats coming out of Venezuela. But the U.S. administration and the military has attacked these vessels. It has claimed the lives of more than 70 people. I want your analysis and what you think the future might be regarding Venezuela and this narco trafficking.
Yes, thank you for the question. My question will begin with a question. Where is the proof, the evidence that there are the residue, the debris, the bodies of the so-called drug narco-terrorism ships? We have a military in the area. We have not seen any type of physical residue evidence or anything recovered from the area. The accusation of drug trafficking, yes, is a concern coming to the United States. Yes, some of it does come from Venezuela, but the alternative is actually not the alternative, but the actual justification for putting a whole military fleet, including the world's largest aircraft carrier in the region, has a more profound implication. I believe that the issue is they want to put pressure on the current administration in Venezuela to basically quit. Create enough pressure so the government cannot function. They're focusing on defense, military, and what the Americans may or may not do, while our counterintelligence is working inside on basically deposing the government. So I think the real issue is basically trying to get the government change in Venezuela, and that is the reason why we are hanging in the area and why we're so focused on this narco-terrorism coming from this area.
Thank you for your observation. I understand that the Southcom is the acronym used for the U.S. Southern Command, whose area of responsibility covers 31 countries to South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. But in a post on social media, Southcom said U.S. Marines were conducting artillery training on board the USS Iwo Jima. as amphibious assault ship in the Caribbean in support of US President Donald Trump's priorities to disrupt illicit drug traffic and protect the homeland. So he is gearing up, from what I understand, in my humble opinion, that he's gearing up for a further escalation between Venezuela. And not only so, there is a dynamic rift change between the United States of America and the United Kingdom. But I will come back to that later. I want to understand, do you think that military might is the only way to address this issue?
No.
It may not be the only way, but I think that I don't believe so. I hope it's not the case. But adventurism in that region has not been confined to the Trump administration. If you look at what happened in Panama, you look in the past at what happened in Colombia and other places, the United States has taken unilateral action in the name of trying to interdict trafficking drugs from South and Central America. I believe that this Southcom commander is the replacement for one who resigned over the issue of or what he perceived to be a non-authorized use of military force against Venezuela without, as Norman points out, any specific proof that there were drugs on those ships. And actually, they're very, very small boats. They're just simply like motorized speedboats. That has been a problem for transmitting drugs in the past. But I certainly don't think that the United States has made a case for any kind of invasion into Venezuela based upon these incidents of drug trafficking. And so far, I think most of the attacks have been on international waters, which suggests that there should be some sort of a approval either by the United Nations or by a vote in Congress, which would be declaring an act of war. That something should be done to ratify these actions and to make them 100% legal. And that does not exist at the current time.
Well, I understand this entirety of a legal framework to address this issue, as you were saying. The United Kingdom understands that this may be a violation of international law. And in this regard, the UK has paused some intelligence sharing between the US about suspecting drug trafficking vessels. So the United Kingdom government understands that the US may be breaking international law and hence has stopped suspension of this intelligence sharing. I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes. As you were hearing John Dalton in the studio, and how America needs a further clarification whether or not they should attack these vessels coming out of the region. And the rift away between UK and US, there are other issues between the two regions that I have mentioned. But I want to understand, why do you think the United Kingdom sees this otherwise or sees it differently than what the US administration understands? Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes.
Yes, historically, the UK has always had a history and territory in the Caribbean, South American area. And their intelligence is not showing justification. It appears that the drug trafficking scenario that we are using is just flakes in the wind in terms of what is really going on. Again, I'm going back to the issue of is that we're looking at a issue with the government in Venezuela and what they are doing. What else they're doing, we don't know. It's not been publicly put out, but it's more than just the mere essence of drugs coming from that region to the United States. There's more issues that has not been publicly put out yet. I'm not at liberty to put out, but there's a reason for the season.
Thank you so much, as you have put it in so gracefully, Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes. Ladies and gentlemen, there are far more issues that I will bring up, but production has directed me to go for a short commercial break.
Luxury in Dhaka.
সারা দেশে লাখো মানুষের কঠোর কর্মতৎপরতা ও নিষ্ঠায় এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন 16 কোটি মানুষের হাতের নাগালে। দীর্ঘ 30 বছর ধরে বিশ্বস্ততা ও দ্রুততার সাথে সেবা দেওয়ায় গ্রাহক সেবায় এখন শীর্ষে। বাংলাদেশে গ্রাহক সেবার সাফল্যের পর এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন বিশ্ব বাণিজ্য কেন্দ্র সিঙ্গাপুরে। আপনার যে কোনো পণ্য সিঙ্গাপুর থেকে বাংলাদেশে বুকিং এর জন্য যোগাযোগ করুন। এসএ পরিবহন প্রাইভেট লিমিটেড, লজিস্টিক্স পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস, 22 রবার্টস লেন, সিঙ্গাপুর 218302। ফোন 0065 629 24900। বাংলাদেশ থেকে সিঙ্গাপুরে পণ্য বুকিং এর জন্য যোগাযোগ করুন ঢাকা সহ দেশের যে কোনো 80টি শাখা কেন্দ্রে। এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস, আপনার সেবা সব সময়।
Welcome, Grand Palace Hotel, Dhaka.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to International Affairs. I am joined by John Charles Dalton in the studio and of course Norman Floyd Barnes, who joins us from Washington DC. Before going into the break, we were talking about US position in Venezuela. However, I want to change the topic here, but it is another topic that includes POTUS, the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Previously, as you know, the attack on Capitol Hill, it had shown, BBC had shown a broadcaster, the greatest, biggest broadcaster from the United Kingdom, had shown that Donald Trump's documentary, which is called Trump, A Second Chance, labeled as so. Donald Trump is threatening the BBC by suing the BBC for almost about $5 billion. The crux of this entire issue that includes the January 6th speech, almost 50 minutes apart. It was edited in a manner which implies that Donald Trump had tried to invoke and catalyze the people to attack the Capitol Hill building. As far as we know, Donald Trump is now the 47th President of the United States of America, and now he sees it fit to take on the BBC, of course, property of the British government. I want to begin with John. I know that Donald Trump, he has some kind of charisma in addressing these issues. Two top officials of the BBC had resigned regarding this issue earlier on. I picked it out. I want to ask you, what is the role of media, and how does media play a role in influencing foreign activities such as the one I just mentioned?
Which foreign activities now?
Such as the riot that took place in Capitol Hill.
Yeah, okay. Well, the documentary, I think by the fact that there have been resignations on the BBC, indicate that sort of an implied admission that they did in fact doctor the tape to make it appear as if one statement early on in his presentation on the ellipse on the mall and one statement after that were brought together to make it appear as if he was inciting the crowd to riot and to attack the Congress. That is clearly inaccurate, and they have admitted that it was inaccurate, and Donald Trump is suing for $5 billion, suing the BBC. Now, in England, they allege, of course, that the statute of limitations has already expired, that he has no right to bring a suit such as that, and that it's impossible to allege damages at that level when he has been elected President of the United States, and there seems to have been no harmful effect from what was said. It was a lie. It was a misuse of the media. They tried to make a story out of something that wasn't true. They should be held accountable for it. But whether a $5 million suit on an item that is so far in the past will prevail or not, that's up to the courts, of course, to decide. But Mr. Trump is known to be litigious. He is known to go to court. He has won in court over numerous media outlets. And so we'll just have to wait and see whether he has a smart enough lawyer that can challenge the BBC and get some compensation.
Of course, thank you for your observation. This is, as far as I know, not the first time the BBC had made a mistake in its editorial policy. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to shift the topic of discussion. It will, of course, include Donald Trump, but it will now focus on the Middle East. There is an interesting story that I must bring around. Almost around 153 Palestinians landed in South Africa. Now, this is the title of the story, but I want to know from both my panelists on this issue. Almost 153 Palestinians had left Ramon airport from Israel, as far as I know, and they had paid a lot of money for them to be transferred into other regions. And from what I know, and various media outlets have said that this happened under the guise on a chartered plane. They first landed in Kenya and then into South Africa. It has huge international implications. The government of South Africa is uncertain if they intend to apply for asylum. Of course, a well-known South African NGO, Gift of the Giver, stepped in and offered accommodation for the group. Of course, in this issue, none of these Palestinians had an Israeli exit stamp. So this raises concern about why choosing South Africa, and almost about 23 of them moved on to other countries. I will want to begin with Norman Floyd Barnes. I understand that the Gaza situation, I've been reporting about it for more than 7 months now, and to my understanding, this is something new that's coming out. Palestinian people, those who are refugee in the standard of refugee, they have flown into South Africa out of all nations. My question to Norman Floyd Barnes: this has huge international implications on this disaster zone that we know as Gaza. How do you see this as Palestinians are seeking refuge in a continent like South Africa? Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes.
Yes, this is a very interesting phenomenon developing. It's being exposed. We first talked about moving Palestinians into Sudan. That was a scenario. That was exposed. It didn't work. So now we're talking about South Africa. Now, apparently, there's some type of support, outside support, moving Palestinians through a unannounced private, nonprofit, unnamed organization to South Africa without proper documents. This has been going on for a while. Some cases, people have paid exorbitant amounts of funds and fees to get to this area. Asylum has been offered. People have arrived. They just mentioned 150 people just arrived. Some had paperwork, some did not. The South African government has decided to take on some of these because of their beliefs and past. This is a political situation, also a financial situation. So the question is, who is supporting this? Who has the means to do this, and why are they doing this? Obviously, there's a plan in place for the displacement of the Palestinian people. You see it by this action. Small amounts of people of influence and impact has been displaced and moved. So looking at the big picture, what do we see? We see that there's a plan to have this area change. The Palestinians is no longer welcome in the area. There's plans to move and place some of the prominent people in this area and move the other people to another area. So we're now catching on. Basically, there's a undercurrent going on. There's a plan, and it could be associated with some of the Western people. It could be associated with, European. But there's a conversation going on. Could be the Middle East, could be the Arab states. There's a conversation going on about the next phase. And the next phase do not look like having the Palestinians having their own state.
Of course, I understand what the Palestinian people do not have any kind of determination. I thank Norman Floyd Barnes on opening the issue. I want to come to John Dalton in the studio. As you were hearing Norman Floyd Barnes and this entire issue of where the Palestinians are going to call their homeland. A similar issue after World War II that we've seen with the Jews that moved into then what was known as Palestine. There is some reports that suggest almost about 150 to 200 Hamas fighters are trapped underground inside Gaza, specifically in the Rafah area, which is partially under Israeli military control. So the implication, this of course undermines the ceasefire agreement that was brought in by the US administration. And before the show, me and you were discussing about there's a board of peace regarding this Gaza issue or reconstruction of Gaza. As you were saying, that it includes technocrats and leadership of many Arab nations who will be running Gaza in the future. I want to understand how you feel about this.
Well, you know, that on that specific issue, I think it's just to explain a little bit further. There's the Trump Board of Peace. He's the chairman. He's inviting heads of state to join at that level. Below that level, at least one step below, maybe two, is a group of technocrats, Palestinians, who will basically take decisions about what's going to get done, so alleged. In the middle, there may well be a secretariat of some kind. Mr. Tony Blair has been identified as an individual and his allies who would serve in that capacity to sort of guide the investments that are going to be taking place in Gaza, and that the technocrats on the ground, and they would have to come from the diaspora because there's not that many technocrats either in the West Bank or in Gaza who would be willing to serve in that capacity. That would be the institutional structure that would be there, but it's just occupation in another name. It's a lack of sovereignty. It doesn't entirely cut off the possibility for a two-state solution, but this was presented to the United Nations, and with the support of many Arab countries. The opposition comes from countries like Russia and China that see this as adventurism by the United States taking over land on the Eastern Mediterranean, which may have a future military use. But you know, it's a long way from reality. In addition, we have the problem of the International Security Force, that they're looking to get approval for them as well, but they're not going to be under the United Nations, unlike other blue helmets that have served around the world as in a peacekeeping capacity. This would be sort of like a resident police force, if you will, from the Arabic-speaking countries. So, I mean, there's a lot of open questions on how this organization would work. It's going to be located in Cairo. The board is going to be situated in Cairo. All the decisions will be made from Cairo. And so I think they're trying to move as quick as they can to get the facts on the ground, to get something in place as an institutional organizational entity to be able to deal with the situation and post ceasefire agreement. The situation in the tunnels in Rafah, I mean, that's a totally different, I mean, Israel will not tolerate that under any circumstances. It's either surrender or get bombed into oblivion.
Of course, it's supposed and of course alleged. There has not been any kind of solid proof that there are some implying tunnels inside Gaza which Hamas is using. And we know that ever since the ceasefire took effect 1 month ago, Israeli attacks have killed at least 242 Palestinians and injured 622 Palestinians in the region. I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes. I'm sure you were hearing how John Dalton was talking about this board of peace that Donald Trump seems to be creating. And of course, he said that the progress right now is in its advanced stages. Donald Trump claims that the phases are overlapping, meaning some sort of reconstruction governance is in the row. And one cannot avoid the fact that having a base inside Gaza, as you were telling us, and even before the show, I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes. I know that there's a time limitation, but I want your brief answer regarding this. United States see a lot of strategic advances in Gaza, and of course their outright support of Israel even while this genocide had continued on. It creates new implications for the United States of America as far as I know. But my question to you, Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes, when do you see the reconstruction of Gaza, and do you think the Palestinians will have their right to self-determination?
Well, I wish I had more time. But let me lay out a scenario that is developing right now. China, Russia, and some of the Arab countries have voiced their disapproval of this border peace initiative. The appearance, and I can tell you from personal experience from working and being in that region, the brothers in the area of that region, the Gulf states, are viewing this as another attempt for the Western regime to colonize the area through Israeli intent, through the United States and other Western parts trying to come in there and impose their will and to dissipate and eliminate the possibility of Palestine having their own free will and making a point. The issue with Russia and China is that they believe that every country should internally have their own form of government, how they want to rule and do things. They should not be influenced by external. By having this board is basically creating a situation where they will colonize the region and impose external governing parties over the local people. This is a defeat in terms of Palestine and the people of the region. They need to be governed by themselves. They need to have self-determination. They need to have their own ways of how they want to run the country. It should not be done by an outside force, particularly a Western party. So we're going to see a lot of support being put in towards what's going on in terms of developing this Palestinian state. And now we have new players. We have Russia, we have China, and other people are now looking at this, and they already voiced their opinion to the UN on this, that they do not approve of it, and to the point where we may have support, we may have another situation. You notice what's happening in Venezuela. They also, China and Russia are now looking at the situation. So we're looking at this situation of fighting back the Western world and moving on to a new regime, a new area, a new multipolar opportunity where people have their own determination on how they want to run the government, and they should not be opposed by a Western power like the United States.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes. I understand there is a time limitation on Zoom. However, production, we shall be connecting you in a short while. I want to come to John. You were hearing how Norman Floyd Barnes was talking about this Board of Peace and how it has undermined the rights for the Palestinians. There is one more issue that I want to bring out regarding Middle East and the sufferings of the Gaza people. A cold temperature and heavy rainfall are worsening already dire conditions for displaced Palestinian families across Gaza. It is almost mid-November, and we see such heavy rainfall in the Middle East. It's nothing new, but it is also creating issues for the Palestinians. People in Gaza attempted to dig trenches around the flimsy tents to keep the water from flooding their tents. So it's a very dire situation that we see here. But as we were talking about the Board of Peace, will it be answering these issues that are on the ground, that are that are overlooked by the governance on social media and of course all medias? How do you think this has a very damaging effect to the people?
Yeah, it's a miserable condition, I'm sure. The Board of Peace and the Palestinian technocrats and all of that stuff was something like what was tried after the Oslo Accords 20 years ago. It didn't work very well. And the right to self-determination, the right not to be occupied is extremely important. But if we're focusing way up here on the institutional level and we're forgetting about the people, we're missing the humanitarian component of the ceasefire.
Of course.
And the trucks are being stopped at the border. Israel is not allowing humanitarian aid to come in. So the reconstruction that people are talking about is a physical reconstruction as opposed to an emotional and spiritual reconstruction necessary for the poor Palestinian people who are suffering. So I think that it's important that somehow or other we don't lose track of the individual people, the suffering on the ground, what's happening in Gaza, which is, it's been devastated. a flood that would be coming into there, and it happens quite frequently, actually, having lived there. But it's a sad, sad situation. I mean, you know, we're playing with this game of Palestinians like it's the pieces on a chessboard, as opposed to real live people who are suffering, children dying. And so the humanitarian component of this whole ceasefire is missing and needs to be ramped up significantly in order to give the people some chance of a decent life. I saw they opened some of the schools there. It was really heartwarming to see that the schools had reopened, children had re-engaged with their teachers and are back in school.
Yes.
And there were some little glimmers of hope, green sprouts that are coming here and there. But as long as we focus on this macro level solution,
Right.
we're really going to miss the point.
Thank you so much. That was an astute observation regarding this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about how the floods have devastated the Palestinians in Gaza as of recent. Do stay with us as we head for a commercial break. But when we come back, climate change is going to be on the agenda.
Lobby, blending timeless elegance with modern design. Experience 5-star comfort in suites and rooms. Sophisticated fine dining restaurant. Crystal clear swimming pool for ultimate relaxation. Modern gym and serene spa for well-being. Perfect venue for corporate events, weddings and parties. Seamless and secured. Elegant and eye-catching design. Indulge, relax, discover the first 5-star chain hotels in Bangladesh. Grand Palace Hotel Dhaka, 22 Kakrail, Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Welcome to Grand Club at Mirpur 10 Dhaka. Elegant spa and wellness facility for ladies and gents. Play pool and snooker in international standard billiard zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to International Affairs. In the studio, we have John Charles Dalton, who has been commenting about regular issues and issues that have humanitarian implications. I want to begin this segment of the program with climate change. We know that the COP30 is going on, understanding the issues of climate change affecting families and households across the globe. This recent meeting held in Belém, Brazil, has been marred with a lot of protests from both indigenous tribes in the Amazon rainforest, and not only so, it increasing pressure of the Paris Agreement, which says the 1.5 plus Celsius degrees plus climate, what do you call it, a type of coordination or an agreement that had held in Paris. I want to come to John. We know it's been marred by protests, and a lot of them are voicing concerns that these meetings do not really have real-life implications when it comes to global warming.
Yeah.
Today, there are two issues. I was talking about the flooding in Gaza. It's mid-November. We are heading into winter season, yet we see such heavy rainfall not only there, but I will want to come to a later story. But my question to you is, do you really think these meetings help? I mean, it's been held every year. Even so, people are not giving any kind of importance to climate change.
Yeah, it's a talking shop mostly. It has been for, this is number 30, so 29 in the past. The Paris Accord, I mean, don't forget that Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Accord. Joe Biden renewed, and then Trump has backed out of it again. He does not accept the global ability to control what the United States does. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I see this as the fact that even if all of the good things that people want to do to try to address global warming, the effects of global warming are outpacing our ability to put in money and to put mitigation adaptation in place. That we may actually be past the tipping point. And that the choice for international financial support comes down to a choice between whether or not we're going to fund the causes of the problem, scrubbers in towers at nuclear power plants and the like, or whether we're going to deal with the consequences. We're going to focus on the cause and invest all kinds of money in technology improvements and so forth, make people rich again, or we're going to try to deal with the people-centric consequences of it, the floodings that affect people on the ground. Here in Bangladesh, for example, are we going to focus on doing things that are like high-tech solutions, or are we going to try to recapture some of the erosion effects that are happening down in the south in Borishal and Chattogram and that area?
Right.
At this choice between cause and consequence, where we put our money, is going to be a deciding factor, I think, over the next decade in public financing. Right now, it's all going to the cause side. We're building technology solutions. We're thinking about what needs to be done to stop the global warming, stop fossil fuels and the like. But in the meantime, all the people in Jamaica that are affected by Tropical Storm Melissa,
Yes.
they don't want to talk about that as a solution. That doesn't solve their problem. And the problems are becoming so accelerated, so extreme, that I think there has to be some discussion made by the multi-donors and by philanthropists and others to say, we have to find some way to adapt, spend more money on adaptation, less on mitigation, deal with the poor people who are suffering from the effects of climate change even now. Droughts, inability to feed the children because there's all the land is arid and overrun, floods, fires, whatever they happen to be. We have to find some way to have enough ability to sort of address the consequences and say that these have been caused by these technology problems specifically, and use other means besides simply technology improvements, sanctions, penalties, financial controls, whatever that happens to be. We have to stop thinking only about technology as a solution, but look at more of people-centric kind of what are we doing about the consequences of global warming.
Of course.
That's someone thinking about that. I don't mean to like bore you with that whole discussion.
I'm definitely not bored, but when we talk about climate change, it's such a big, broad topic.
Yeah.
It includes flooding, it includes drought, it includes the change
Fire.
of the ozone layer. Several wildfires have taken place. All of these are calamities in my understanding. And the recent one, ladies and gentlemen, had taken place in the Welsh town left underwater by Storm Claudia. Overnight floods on Saturday, on November 15, left much of the town in Monmouth completely underwater. So it's safe to say that even the United Kingdom as a whole is not spared from what these storms can possess. And of course, it has left almost 80 flood-related incidents had happened because of this storm belt. And previously, so you were mentioning about Hurricane Melissa torn through the Caribbean. It had gone through Jamaica, and right now the importance would be for Jamaica itself, rebuilding the nation, rebuilding the Black River area that has been heavily damaged by this storm. And not only so, we have the Philippines, Vietnam as well, been attacked by two different hurricanes. So question back to you would be, we know COP30, it does not have any kind of fruitful results. But do you think that every nation should have some kind of fund reserved for when they face a calamity they may use? How do you think about this?
Well, I think in the United States, most states have something called a rainy day fund. And that's what it's for addressing problems that happen they're unpredictable. Whether it's a huge snowfall or rain or floods or what have you. Don't forget, to its embarrassment, the United States administration has cut back on FEMA funding so that we don't have the ability to respond as quickly as we once did to natural disasters.
One of them maybe is the Texas flooding that happened, earlier this year.
And FEMA was unable to do as much as it normally does. North Carolina was also a good example last year. But the whole question about, like, if you take that Melissa effect in Jamaica, I mean, there's some question about what do we do now about that specific consequences from a human point of view, not just humanitarian aid, but I mean, what happens to the displaced children that don't go to school? More attention needs to be placed, not just simply, for example, one of the things that's coming out of COP30 is a $2.5 billion fund for rainforest protection. So that's mitigation in some respect, okay? But that's a lot of money that, if spent on the consequences of global warming, could maybe have a more direct impact on the planet. It's a good showpiece. It says something important, but you know, again, I don't want to sound like a goody two-shoes here, but it just seems to me that we have to spend more time looking at people-centric solutions to global warming.
Of course, there was a profound analogy and observation regarding global warming. And while we were discussing, production has joined Norman Floyd Barnes with us on the program once again. My question to Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes, while you were away, we were talking about the implications of global warming and how protests had marred the COP30 venue in Belém, Brazil. Meanwhile, there has been flooding, as I said before, in Gaza and now in Wales. The entire city has reported almost 80 incidences of flooding. My question to Norman Floyd Barnes would be the same that I have asked John in the studio. Do you think that nations all around the world should have a fund that addresses the calamities of nature after they happen and the damage that they create for the economy of various regions? Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes.
Yes, you're talking to a goody two-shoes guy. I want to tell you a little story. I was a FEMA incident commander for this region here in Washington, and one of the things is we have to prepare. You know, this concept of running and saving the day and putting things back in order doesn't work. You have to have risk mitigation issues. You have to have think about technologies. Use technology. Use proven skills in the ancient times. The infrastructure. We need to go back and build a resilient infrastructure, and we need to have early warning systems. We need to educate people on good stewardship on how to deal with the lands. Low-lying countries like Bangladesh is going to be affected by rising tides. It's coming. We're going to have more flood. We just had yesterday another terrible flooding in California, which is the rainstorms. It's flooding. It's coming. It's going to happen. So what are we going to do? We need to have something in place to address what's going on, not to try to prevent. It's trying to, I use the concept, we want to stop the wind. We run outside with a kitchen fork and try to stop the wind. That's what we're doing. It's not happening. So you have to deal with what we know is going to happen, and we have to put things in place to minimize the loss and to educate people on how to recognize issues and deal with it. We have to learn to deal with nature. Mother Nature rules. We have to learn.
That was a very important metaphor that Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes used to describe the situation at large. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ending the program here, but before I do so, I want to thank John Charles Dalton in the studio and, of course, Norman Floyd Barnes for their valuable insight and contributions to this International Affairs program. Ladies and gentlemen, today is November the 16th. It's significant internationally as the International Day for Tolerance, a UN observation to promote mutual understanding and respect among cultures, and it also marks the founding of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, also known as UNESCO. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. I shall see you all tomorrow.